I hurried and jumped out the shower, changing into my black bikini. I ran across my hotel room, grabbing my makeup. I didn't want to put too much on because I'm going to a beach party music festival. I wiggled into some khaki shorts as I slipped on some white Toms just as there was a knock on the door. Swinging the door opened, I saw my best friend Nicole. She has been my friend since we were both in diapers. But last year she has moved to Australia with her mom since her parents got divorced. This summer I came to visit her for a few weeks. Nicole stood there with a smile, perfect smile. She had naturally tanned skin and beautiful dark brown curly hair that matched her brown eyes. She was taller than me, but she was taller than a lot of girls. She stood at a tall frame of 5'9". "Here you go, sweets," Nicole said, as she placed a flower crown head wrap on my head. It was simple band with white flowers matching the one Nicole had. "Let's go," she yelled, grabbing my arms, dragging out the hotel. It was only about a 5-minute walk to the beach, so we were there in no time. There were so many people gathered at the beach. There was a band playing, people dancing and drinking. "I'm gonna go grab the drinks," she yelled over the music, walking away from me into the crowd of people. I stood by myself looking around. The sun was setting and there's were bunches of people here. I felt a hand grab my waist to spin me around. I saw some random guy standing there looking at me up and down. "Can I help you?" I asked him, and he just smirked. I could smell the alcohol off his breath. Anyone standing within 10 feet of him probably could. "Yes, you can," he said, winking and pulling me closer to him. His hands roamed my body, making me feel uncomfortable. I tried to back away from him, but he gripped onto me tighter, probably leaving bruises. "Let go," I said, pulling at his arm. "Babe, let's just have some fun," he whispered as he placed gross wet kisses on my neck. "You gross," I said, pushing his chest away from me. "You and all of you glory are gonna have some much fun tonight, and I'm not gonna take no as an answer," he said, as he arms grabbed my ass. What the hell was wrong with this guy? "Get off!" I yelled at him, and finally he got pulled off me. I looked at my wrist and saw huge bruises forming. I slowly rubbed them, trying to ease the pain. I felt large, warm hands placed on my hips. I looked up to meet the most beautiful dark eyes. "Are you okay?" he asked as he looked at my bruised wrist. H nodded, looking back down. He was so perfect looking, his brown hair in that messy and the I don't care look, his dark hazel eyes and his perfect jawline. He had a slight stubble, and he had to be 6 foot or taller. His body built, and he had an amazing six-pack. There were a couple tattoos scattered across his body, but not too many. "Hey, cutie, are you sure?" he asked lightly, touching my chin, making me look up at him. I gave him a perfect smile due to the braces I had in freshman year. He smiled back at me, making my knees go weak. "I'm Carl," he said in his deep, husky voice. "Rose," I told him. "Are you here alone, or?" he asked, looking around. "I'm here with my friend, but she kinda disappeared to get us drinks 10 minutes ago," I told him, making him chuckle. He wrapped his arms around my waist and started leading me through the drunk people. "Where are we going?" I asked him, confused. "To get the pretty girl a drink," he said, smirking, making me smirk back at him. A drink is just what I needed right now. A couple of drinks later, I was slightly tipsy. Not too tipsy, just enough to give me the confidence to talk to a hot guy all night long. I had a bottle of vodka in my right hand, holding it up as I swayed to the music. Carl was behind me, holding me close to his body and his hands resting on, my hips swaying with me. I turned around in his arms, looking up at him. "Let's go swimming," I said, smiling, and he sent me back a smile. "Let's," he said, taking the bottle of vodka that was halfway empty and chugging it down. He grabbed my hand and we ran towards the shore. It was dark out, the moon and stars covered the sky. I slipped off my shoes and then my shorts. I heard a deep groan from behind me. I turned around to see Carl staring at me. I winked at him before running into the ocean. I thought it would be cold, but it is Australia, and the water was oddly warm. I dove under the water and then came back up to see that Carl disappeared. I looked around, no sign of him. I let out a loud scream as I felt something grab my foot and pull me under. Carl came up from under the water, laughing at me. "You're such a jerk," I yelled, pushing him away from me. "Am I?" he asked, still laughing. "Yes, you are." I laughed, splashing him with some water. "Are we really going to go there?" he asked me. I smirked at him, splashed some water in his face. He grabbed me and spun me around. I was laughing till I saw a wave coming. Then it was too late. Carl threw me into the wave. I got out the water. I turned around and glared at him. "You little prick," I yelled, and he looked down at my boobs, which made me glare at him even more. "Perv," I mumbled. And then he looked up at me. He smiled his perfect smile, then sent me a wink. He bent down to the water and picked up a black piece of fabric. I looked closer and noticed it was my top. I looked down and noticed I was naked. I let out a scream as I covered my boobs with my arms. "Hey, why so shy now?" he asked, his voice coming closer. I felt my cheek burn as I looked down. "Hey now, look at me," he said, as his fingers ran down my arms lightly. Tingles shot through my body. I looked up at Carl, chewing my bottom lip. "You're beautiful," he whispers, making my cheeks get even hotter than they were before. "Give it back," I whispered, still giving him a slight glare. He smirked as he handed it back to me. I turned around away from him, slipping on the black top. I was about to tie it when I felt his hands on my back. He took the strings and tied it. Every time his fingers brushed against my skin, their weird spark that ran through me, making me shiver. "Okay, love," he said, spinning me around, making me look up at him, not being able to control the blush. "You blush so easily," he said, running his finger over my cheeks. "Stop," I mumbled, grabbing his forearm. He looked down at where I touched him. Then he looked back down at me. "Can I kiss you?" he asked me with this weird glint in his eyes. I almost fell back, not expecting such a question. I am not the type of girl who guys usually like. Before I could answer his question, felt his rough lips were on mine. I let out a little moan, grabbing onto his shoulders, standing on my tippy toes, trying to get closer to him. I felt his large hands slip down my waist to my hips, pulling me closer to him. He let them slip down my butt and to my thighs, picking me up. I wrapped my legs around his torso as his hands held me up by my bum. I felt millions of different feelings as he bit my lower lip. I moaned and he groaned into my mouth, slipping his tongue into my mouth. His tongue explored every inch of my mouth and then pull away, letting me breath. My hands rested on his chest as I was breathing heavily. But he didn't stop kissing me, from my lips to my jaw and down my neck. I felt him nibble and suck on some parts, making me giggle, and then he pulled away with a cheesy grin on his face. That was the best kiss of my life. He mumbled into my shoulder where he left a kiss. "That was my first kiss," I whispered, making him look at me shocked. "Really? Are you sure?" he asked me, making me laugh. "Yeah, I'm pretty sure," I mumbled, getting slightly embarrassed. "Well, babe, you're a hell of a kisser," he said, giving me another fast peck on the lips. "I think I need to find my friend," I said, looking back over to where everyone was. They were singing along to some song. "Okay," he said, carrying me out of the ocean. He placed me down on the sand, and I slowly slid on my clothes. I looked at him, making him smirked. He placed his hand on the small of my back, leading me back towards the people. We looked for 20 minutes, but I couldn't find her. Nicole probably out there having fun somewhere. She forgot all about me. I whispered, as Carl pulled me closer to his side. "Hey, I'll walk you home," he said, making me smile. "Clearly you can't let me just leave alone. It's dark out," I said, joking, but honestly I was terrified of the dark. "Yeah, I can't leave you alone for a second, could I?" He joked back, making me laugh along with him. We walked down the street that led us to our hotel. "Well, I'm here," I said, pointing towards the hotel. "Yeah? Well, here, put your number in my phone. Tomorrow we are going out on a date," he said, smiling. "What a gentleman way to ask," I said, rolling my eyes. "You love it," he whispered into my ear, his breath sending goosebumps down my shoulder and back. I placed my number in his phone and gave it back to him. I turned around about to walk back in, but I felt him spin me around. "Good night kiss?" he asked, giving me puppy eyes. I smiled, standing on my tippy toes, gripping his neck, bring him closer to me. I kissed him gently on the lips. This kiss was slow and sweet, unlike that other one. I pulled away from him, leaving him with a huge smile pasted on his face. "Good night, Carl," I said, walking to the hotel. "Good night, princess," he yelled, making me laugh, turning around, blowing him a kiss, and running into the lobby and then to my room, which was on the top floor. I looked inside and noticed someone in my bed. I looked closer and noticed fast Nicole asleep. I got changed into a t-shirt and laid on the other side of the bed going to sleep. Cal's povey yesterday, I met the most perfect girl. She might have been slightly shorter than average and very delicate, but she was perfect in every way. Her huge gray eyes with long dark lashes and the little freckle under her left eye. Her small button-like nose. Her pink plump lips that were oh so sweet. She wasn't tan, but she wasn't pale. Her collarbones that were noticeable and her nice cheekbones. She wasn't skinny. She had good curves and a great ass with a good set of boob. Her smile was perfect, and then her laugh. Words can't describe her amazing God-gift to man laugh. When I kissed her, I don't know why, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. I have always just had girls as one-night stands. Not girlfriend thing, but her. I don't know. I barely know her, and she already going non-stop in my mind. I slowly got out of my hotel bed and grabbed my phone. It was already 8 p.m. I texted Rose telling her I'm coming by in 20 minutes for the date. I got up, changed into khakis, cargo shorts, and a black V-neck shirt. I slipped on my shoes as I was leaving my hotel to go to pick her up. As I got there, I texted her I was here. I saw her run out the doors of the hotel. Her big gray eyes scanned around and stopped at me. A smile formed on her face as she walked over to me. She looked like she put some time in her appearance. She had her blonde hair in curls. Her makeup seemed perfect to the pinpoint, and she had on a simple black dress. "Hey," she said, smiling, looking up at me. "Hey," I said, swinging my arm around her as I started walking with her. "Where are we going?" she asked me as she wrapped her arm around my torso, leaning closer to myself. "I was thinking we can get some frozen yogurt," I said, slipping my hand down and grabbing hers, with my arm still around hers. "Frozen yogurt?" she asked, making me frown. "Shit. You don't like it, we could go to a cafe or something else," I rambled as I panic. I wanted this to be as close to perfect as I can make it. "I absolutely love frozen yogurt," she said, smiling at me. "You do?" I asked, smiling. "Literally my favorite food," she said, making me smile even more than I already was. Good, I did something right. As we got there, I saw Rose looking around with big eyes. I grabbed her hand and brought her to the back where all the frozen yogurt was. She got one container, filling it with cake batter yogurt. I filled mine with mint chocolate chip. I watched as she walked over to where all the toppings were. She added chocolate syrup and pink little gummy with some chocolate peanut butter candy. "Want to eat here or the beach?" I asked her, taking her yogurt and paying for it. The beach, she answered as I grabbing 2 spoons. We ate the yogurt, talking about anything and everything as we walked down the beach. It was getting late. The sun was setting, making the sun pink. It was perfect. I never been ice skating and I always wanted to go, she said as she walked next to me, her hand swinging, brushing against mine. Well, lucky you, because I happened to play ice hockey for years, I said, smiling at her, hoping it would slightly impress her. Yeah, lucky me, she said, taking a M&M from my yogurt. Hey, what do you think you are doing? I asked her, pushing her with my hip. I didn't expect her to tip and fall down. I guess I underestimated my strength, and she's probably extremely clumsy. Crap. I mumbled, helping her up as she laughed as she got up from the sand. Fatty, she mumbled as she tried to push me, but I wouldn't budge. Maybe you're just too weak, I said, making her glare at me. Dude, I could totally do like 3 push-ups, she said, flexing her arm. Whoa, 3, that's so many, I said, laughing at her lack of muscle. Hey, I play soccer. I don't have any upper body strength, she said, pouted slightly as she crossed her arms over her chest. You play soccer? I asked her as I wrapped my arm around her, making her lean closer to me. Since I was 6, she said with a proud smile plastered on her face. Are you any good? I asked her. The best there ever was, she said, smirking up at me. Cocky, are we? I asked her as I smirked down at her. No, honestly, she said, winking at me, making me cheeks heat up. Want to head back to my place and watch a movie? I asked her. We already missed the movie that I planned for us to see at a pull-in theater. Your place? She asked, raising her eyebrow. Yeah, what's wrong with my place? I asked her, giving her a smile. Okay, she said, grabbing my container and throwing it away with hers. As we walked, I saw her checking her phone a couple of times. Who are you texting? I asked, making her look up at me. Nicole wanted to know where I am, who I am with, why I am out without. Her? She answered, smiling to herself as she talked about her friend. Clingy, I mumbled. No, she just loves me too much, she said, smiling at me. I grabbed her hand, stopping her by the hotel I was staying at. Hotel? She asked me as she eyed the hotel with confused look. Yeah, I don't live around this part, I told her. She nodded, pulling me along with her to the hotel. I grabbed her hand, leading her to the top floor condo. What movie do you want to watch? I asked her as I turned on the TV. I looked over at Rose for an answer, but she was still thinking over it, her eyebrows scrunched together as she chewed on her bottom lip. Hangover, she said as her eyes light up a little. Part 1 or 2? I asked, making her think about it again. 1, she answered, making me chuckle as I turned it on. She sat down, on the bed, and I sat next to her, wrapping my arm around her. Rose slipped her legs over my lap and played with my hand that held onto hers. During the movie, we were both laughing at every single little thing. As she was laughing at something, I looked down at her. I don't know. I guess something in my clicked or something. I leaned down and placed my lips onto hers. She kissed back, and her hand went up my arm to my neck. I grabbed her by her hips and placing her on top of me. Her fingers ran down my arms and her long nails scratching my skin. I felt her moan into my mouth as I gripped onto her bum and slipped my tongue into her mouth. I felt her playing with the end of my shirt, pulling at it. I pulled back, slipping it off. Rose looked at me, staring at my chest and abs. She seemed like she was in some sort of daze, her eyes wide, and she bit down on her lower lip. Like what? You see? I asked her and flipped us over so I was on top of her. I held my weight so I wouldn't crush her. Yeah, I really like, she whispered, tracing each of my abs. I growled and bent my head down, kissing her again. I felt her bit onto my lip, and I let her tongue slip into my mouth. Our tongue fought for the dominance. Of course I won, and pushed my tongue back into her mouth. I sat us up and started unbuttoning her dress. I looked up at her eyes, making sure it was okay with her. I didn't want to push her into anything she didn't want to do. She nodded as she looked into my eyes, confirming that it was okay for us to continue. As I slipped the dress off her, she sat on my bed in a black lace bra and thong. Her cheeks heated, up giving them a cute pink tint as she looked down. "You're so beautiful," I whispered before I started kissing her again. I was on top of her kissing her, and her nails scratched my back. It didn't hurt. It felt more pleasurable than anything. I slipped off my pants, kicking them off. Before I could go back down to her, she tackled me into the bed, her legs on either side of me as she sat on top of me. "Getting feisty, are we?" I asked as I held onto her hips. She leaned down. She was centimeters away from me. My eyes flickered down to her pink, plump lips. Her lisp brushed against mine, and I grabbed the back of her neck and pushed her lips against mine, kissing her roughly. She pulled away from me, sitting on two of me with cute, swollen lips. "Getting feisty, aren't we?" she quoted me. I winked at her before I flipped us over so that I was on top of her. "Don't play with me," I said, pulling her back towards me. "Why?" she asked. Her nails ran down my chest to my abs and to the hem of my boxers. I groaned and pulled her lips down to mine, kissing her hungrily. My hands roamed over her hips to her stomach and then back to her back where her bra clipped. I unhooked it. I pulled it off her body, throwing it aside. She was laying under me with all her beauty. "Stop looking at me like that," she said, covering her breast. Her cheeks were bright red. "Like what?" I asked her as I gently brushed her warm high cheek. "Like your eyes raping me." She whined and I grinned at her, taking her hands away from her chest. I leaned down and placed a few kisses on her collarbones. "You're beautiful, my princess," I whispered. Kissing her neck where there were some dark love bites from yesterday. She moaned as I sucked on her sensitive skin. She grabbed a hand, full of my hair, and moved my face back to hers. "Don't tease me," I whispered as I crushed my lips back to hers. That night was like the best sleep I have ever gotten. Usually I'm scared of the dark, and I hate sleeping alone. Around 3 a.m, I woke up in Carl's strong, warm arms. I was laying on top of his chest and his arms were around me. I looked at him and his peaceful face. He looked perfect. Why the hell did he even talk to me or notice me? He was like a Greek god or something. Everything about him seemed perfect to me. I love how abnormally tall he was, how his hair is always messy and tousled. I lightly traced his cheekbone, then his strong jawline. His eyes slowly opened as his lips turned into a smile. "Can't sleep?" he asked me, as he lightly grabbed my hand, which was still pressed to his cheek. "I just woke up," I told him. He started sitting up a little, his hands holding the small of my back. I bit onto my bottom lip and looked from his dark, almost black, eyes to his lips. One of his hands went to the back of my neck, bringing me back down to his lips. I felt him pull on my bottom lip, making me moan into his mouth. His tongue slipped into my mouth, fighting with my tongue for dominance. I pulled away, breathing hard. Every time we kissed, these weird, dumb feelings surfacing. It was like explosions, going on everywhere we touched. I looked down and noticed Carl looking at me. "Rose," he mumbled against my neck as he placed me back on the bed. I laid down closer to him, cuddling up to his side. I knotted my legs in with his, and I felt him grab my hand. He lightly kissed the back of my hand, and then placed it on his chest. "You're perfect," he whispered to me. "You're perfect," he whispered to me. "Why do you keep telling me that?" I asked him. Because everything about you is perfect, he answered me, smiling. Well, you don't know that much about me, I said, making him chuckle. Okay. Tell me why you're not perfect, he said, looking down at me with a serious look. Okay, first, I can't sing for my life, but I sign everywhere. The car, the shower. I have very bad balance, and I'm like a gold medalist in being clumsy. I'm way too stubborn, and I suck at all the emotion talks, or even showing emotion. I told him. I'm not sure why I told him, but I did. Would you think that I'm crazy if I still think you're perfect? He asked, making me laugh. Yeah, totally mental, I told him, causing him to smile. I think you forgot to say that you're sarcastic and rude, he said, giving me a goofy smile. Yeah, that. Too. I mumbled into his chest. Are you still tired? He asked, rubbing my arm. Very, I told him. He started to laugh. Good night, princess, he said, and I smiled at that nickname. I closed my eyes, going back to sleep. A.M. in the morning. I woke up and noticed it's 7 a.m. My plane leaves in an hour. I looked at Call, who had his arms tightly around me. I gently took his arms off and crawled out of the back. I looked down and noticed that I was in nothing but my thong. I looked around the room, no sign of my bra. I groaned and picked out some random sweatshirt, a hockey team sweatshirt with the last name of Stone and the number 25. I slipped on my dress and slipped the sweater over it. I grabbed my bag and quickly left his room. I felt like the biggest slut and bitch leaving him, without saying goodbye. I cursed at myself and went back into his room and wrote a note. I quietly left his room after that and got myself a taxi and then made my way to my hotel room. I slowly packed everything up. There wasn't much to pack. I went to take a fast shower and then changed back into the sweatshirt and some leggings. I got all my things and saw Nicole standing outside the hotel with her car. She drove me to the airport. It was a fast drive. We didn't talk at all, just a faint sound of music. I'm going to miss you, she said, hugging me tightly. I'll miss you too, Nick, I told her, hugging her back. I was going to miss her so much. She was my best friend. So how was your date with Mr. Hottie? She asked, laughing, rubbing the tears away. Amazing, I told her, winking, and she scrunched her face. You don't be a slut, she joked, making me laugh. It was my first time, and I have no idea why I did, but yeah, I told her, making her laugh. Well, I think you have to go, she said, and I nodded. I grabbed my things and made my way to the plane. I didn't want to leave. I wanted more time with my best friend. And I wanted more time with Call. Call's Povey woke up feeling cold and alone. I frowned spread across my face. I brought my arms out, stretching for Rose. I felt around and didn't feel her around me. I opened my eyes and noticed I was alone. I don't know why it hurt so much, but it hurt like a shit ton. I got up and looked around, trying to think of some reason for her to be here. I checked the bathroom and noticed she wasn't here. She really has left. Nothing. I glared at the wall, anger filled me. How could she just leave? I picked up a vase and threw it across the room. It shattered into thousands of pieces. Why would she just leave? I had lots of one-night stands, but I was the one who always left. Last night was amazing. Why would she go? Did I do something wrong, or did she not feel that connection that we have? Because I sure as hell felt the connection. Some random song started playing from my phone. I groaned and picked up my phone, turning off the alarm. First day back, senior. Year, my last year. I kept convincing myself to get up, only a year left. I got up and walked to take a shower. After the shower, I changed into my school's uniform, which was a navy blue skirt that seemed slightly shorter than it should be, a black tie, and a white button-up shirt that I rolled the sleeves up. I slipped on black over the knee socks and my combat boots. I know I'm probably going to get yelled at for the shoes, but They're my favorite, and school shoes are so uncomfortable. I did my makeup and let my hair down in its natural wave. I rushed down the stairs and grabbed my keys. I grabbed my tea and drove off to St. Jude's High School. When I got there, I slowly walked in the school. The first day is something. Most hugging and talking to friends, talking about how much they missed each other. Well, me, I don't have friends. I'm kinda a loner. I never cared to have friends at school. Most of my friends were older than me anyways. And the best friend I did have my age moved to another country. I made my way people, giving me looks. It's nothing new. I'm always the odd one out. The bell rang and I made my way to my first class English. The day went by so slowly. I never liked going to school. I finally walked from lunch to my last period chemistry. The bell rang and I was still making my way there. I slowly opened the door looking at the floor. The teacher stopped at whatever he was saying and looked at me. I felt everyone's eyes on me. I slowly looked up and my eyes widened. Standing there was Call. He was wearing khaki slacks and a black button-up shirt with his sleeves rolled up. His hair was still in that messy, I don't care look, and it looked like he didn't shave for a week or so. "Rose," he whispered, and I just stared at him. What the hell is he doing here? He's a teacher? How old is he? All these questions running through my mind. I heard someone yell out a question to him, and he snapped out of it and looked at them. "Miss Winchester detention for being late," he said, looking into my eyes. "It took me 2 months just to somewhat try and get over him, and he's here. Never did I think I would ever see this man in my life. Like ever." "He okay?" I whispered, making my way down the rows of lab tables and sat in the back. I watched as he walked around answering questions and telling them rules about the class and what we are going to learn this year. The bell rang and I packed everything up. I was about to walk out, but I heard his deep, husky voice right behind me. "You have detention?" he said, and I turned around and he was inches away from me. "Right," I said, walking back to my seat in the back. I saw him close the door and lock it. He slowly made his way to me. He sat down in the seat in front of me and turned around looking at me. "Shall we talk?" he asked, making me look up from my lab table, and my eyes met those chocolate eyes that I have missed for the last 2 months. "Talk about what?" I asked him, trying to play dumb, which only made him chuckle. "Really? Talk about what?" "Well, 1, you never told me you were underage. 2, you left without saying anything. 3, we had sex," he said, making me almost choked about how blame he is. 1, I'm 18, so I'm not underaged. 2, I left you a note, I told him. He looked at me as if he didn't believe me. "Well, I never saw a note. You could have answered my calls," he said, and I looked down at my thumb fiddling with them. He did have a point there. That day I left back here. "I didn't think I'll ever see you again, so I thought I should get over it," I told him, and he sighed, running his fingers through his already messy hair. "So, what are we going to do?" he asked me lightly, taking my hands in his large ones. "What do you mean?" "We are going to do nothing. We can't do anything," I told him, pulling my hands back from his. "What? Why not?" he asked me, looking at me with those eyes. "Mr. Stone, you're my teacher. Nothing can happen," I told him, and he looked at me, his eyes filled with so many emotions that I couldn't read. "I don't care," he mumbled, making me look at him. "You have to care. If something happened, you'll get fired," I told him. "I don't care. I met you first. Before this job," he said, taking my hand again, slowly rubbing circles into my hand. "We can't," I whispered, looking down at our hands. His large hand held onto my small one. "Everything that happened. Let's just forget everything," I whispered. I slowly got up and grabbed my things and walking out of the class. I got to my Jeep and left the school. The tears slowly fell from my eye down my cheeks. Why did he have to be my teacher? Cal's Povey can't believe I have her again. Well, I don't have her, but I got to see her, talk to her, touch her. When she said we can't be together, it literally broke my heart. At first I was shocked that she was my student. I couldn't believe it, but I couldn't care less. I never thought about any girl. She was the only one who kept me interested. Yes, I was a player, but for the past 2 months I couldn't stop thinking about her. After that amazing night, I drove back to my apartment and grabbed my phone. I grabbed my phone and scrolled to her contact. I clicked new message and texted her. I'm not gonna forget. I slowly got up and changed into some sweatpants and a white shirt before I called Max. Max has been my best friend for years now. We were basically brothers. We grew up together. Hey, man, hockey? I asked him. I need to get my mind off things, and hockey is always a distraction from life. Sure, what's on your mind? He asked me, and I laughed. So remember Australia and that girl? I asked him, causing me to laugh. That blonde? Yeah. What about her? Still draping over her? He asked. I can clearly hear the smirk in his voice. God, he knew me too well. She's my student. I told him, making him laugh way harder than he should have. It wasn't funny at all. It was some strange irony that life is. Seriously? You have to be joking, he said, holding back the laughter. Nope, she really is, I told him, only wishing it was a joke. So are you like a pedophile now? He asked with a serious tone. She's 18. I told him, rolling my eyes at his stupidity. Well, what's the problem then? He asked, but only to get hung up on. I made my way to my Hummer and drove to the ice rink. I changed into some skates and put on a hoodie. 1-on-1? I heard Max's voice. I turned around to see him skating towards me. Why do you even try? I asked him, skating out in the open rink. We played for hours till the place was about to close. As I got to the Hummer, I noticed my phone had a message. I looked at it and saw a text from Rose. Why are you making this so hard? I smiled. At least she had answered me. I quickly answered, tell her that I won't go down without a fight, and for her to have a lovely night. I won't give up on her. My mom told me once, when you have something good, something you care about a lot, you don't ever let it go. Even if you have to be selfish, if they make you happy, keep them forever and never let go. I woke up stretching my arms. Oh, how I didn't want to go to school. I slowly got out of bed and changed into my uniform with a large black cardigan to keep me warm. I tied my hair up and did my makeup like every other day. I slowly made my way to school with my coffee. I walked to my first class. The whole day went on and on. Oh, how I hated school, such a waste of time. Soon I found myself walking to chemistry, and how I didn't want to go to chemistry. I walked into the back of the room, sitting at the lab table. Hello, miss. Winchester, Call said, standing in front of the lab table. Hello, Mr. Stone, I said, not looking up from my notebook. So do you always eat lunch in the library? He asked, making my cheeks burning up. Yeah, I like it quite, I told him. That was the best answer I could give him. I wasn't about to tell him that I ate lunch in the library because I didn't want to sit alone in the cafeteria. You can come by here from lunch instead of being alone in the library, he offered. Rather not, I told him. I looked up and noticed more kids started to walk. You have a class to teach, I whispered to him, and he sent me a smirk. He walked back to the front of the class to start the lesson. I couldn't help myself to stare at him. His perfectly messy dark hair that he kept ruffling. How his white shirt was rolled up to his elbows and a few buttons undone. I could barely focus on what he was talking about. How could any girl focus when he's teaching? As the bell rang, I grabbed my bag and was about to walk out, but I felt his hand pull me back into the class and closed and locked the door. Yes, Mr. Stone? I asked, making him groan. You know, that just makes me more turned on. he said, grabbing my hips, pulling me towards him. I knew my face was probably bright red. Yeah. What do you want, Call? I asked him, trying to push him away from me. A date, he said, like it was the most simplest thing in the world. No, I told him, trying to keep my ground. Why not? He asked, rubbing circles into my skin. Because a teacher can't go on a date with his student, I told him, rolling my eyes. No, one will know, he said, trying to convince me. Really? I asked, and he nodded. I noticed him pulling me closer, and his head leaning closer to mine. His lips were inches away from mine. I looked at them. How badly I wanted to kiss him, but I can't. No way can I kiss him and bring back all those memories. Don't, I whispered as his lips lightly brushed against mine. I slowly pulled myself away from him and walked out of the classroom. I made my way to the library and placed my bag down. Hello, Rose, the librarian said, giving me a smile. Good afternoon, I told her, and went to my usually seat in the back of the library that was surrounded by a shelf of books. I picked up a book about Accent Egypt and started working on some things. About an hour later, I heard someone walk in. No one really came to the library. I looked up and saw Kal walking over to me. What are you doing here? School ended an hour ago, he said, sitting on the table that I had my work spread out on. I'm doing an essay, I told him, rolling my eyes. Why? He asked as he looked through the papers scattered on the table. I'm trying to get all my credits so I can graduate early, I told him. I don't want to stay in this school any longer. I want to go off to college. Why? He asked again, acting like a little kid. What is this? 20 questions? I asked him, looking up from the book. Just wondering, he said, still looking at me. Okay, I said, going back to the book and writing down some notes for my essay. Are you going to leave, or? I asked him, looking up at him. I'll stay, he said, sitting in the chair right next to me. Why? I asked him. So you won't have to be alone, he said, giving me that perfect smile. I looked back, writing more notes. It was hard to focus on the book when I felt him rubbing my leg. The school skirt didn't help because it exposed all my thighs. Knock it off, I'm trying to read, I told him, kicking at his leg. Ow, he mumbled, kicking my foot away. But after kicking him, he didn't stop rubbing my thigh. I told you to knock it off, I said, throwing an eraser at him. What? Does it distract you? He asked with a smug smile on his face. Yes, I yelled, closing my book and standing up, walking over to the shelf and putting the book back. I looked through the books, picking out a new one. It was on the top shelf and I couldn't reach it. I groaned, stretching for it. I got on my tippy toes, reading for the book. Almost there. I could almost touch it. I felt his large hand rest on my lower back as he grabbed the book and spun me around. Ah, you're so short, he said, mocking me in a baby voice. Shut it, Stone, I told him, trying to take the book from him. No, you have to kiss me first, he said, raising the book above my head. Is he serious? I don't need this right now. What? We are in school, I yelled at him. He placed his finger over my lips, shushing me. We're in a library, he said, smirking. Oh, he thinks he's so smart. Just give me the book, I told him, crossing my arms. Kiss me, he said, puckering his lips. And what if someone sees? I asked him, and he smiled down at me. No one comes to the library, he said. Please give me the book, I said, pouting my bottom lip and making big eyes. Not gonna work with me, Rose, he said, making my sigh. Pretty please, I said, leaning closer to him. I felt my chest push up against him. His eyes got wider, and he looked down at me. He leaned down closer to me. Just one kiss, he whispered in my ear as his lips lightly brushed on my skin. Fine, I told him, and he leaned closer to me. Our lips were about to touch, but I noticed in the corner of my eyes and held the book down. I let my hand travel across his chest, up his shoulder, and down his arm. I grabbed the book and ran out of his arms. "Rose!" he yelled, chasing after me. I laughed and hid in the last row of books behind the shelf. "Where are you? You owe me something," he said, and I bite my lip, stopping myself from making any noise. I looked over and didn't see him anymore. My heart started to speed up. "Boo!" I heard his husky, deep voice whisper into my ear. I jumped and let out a little scream. He grabbed my hips, bringing me towards him. Our bodies touched, and his hands held me tightly. His breath hit my lips, and I looked up into his dark eyes. He slowly leaned down and pressed his lips against mine. My hands made their way to his chest, gripping his shirt, pulling him closer to me. I felt him smile into the kiss and slowly lick my bottom lip. I was about to pull away, but he pushed me against the bookshelf. He wrapped my legs around his torso, and I let my hands make their way around his neck. I pulled away, gasping for air, but he kept kissing his way down my neck. I felt him suck hard on a spot, and I let out a moan. "Oh God, Rose, what you do to me." He mumbled into my neck. He placed small kissed back up my neck to my lips. "Call," I moaned out, pushing his chest away from me. "Yeah?" he asked, resting his forehead against mine. "Get off of me," I said, and he smiled, placing me back down on the floor. I gripped the book to my chest and walked to my seat. I started packing everything up as I felt his eyes on me. "You're leaving?" he asked with sad eyes. "Yeah, I have to get home," I told him, and he nodded. "Come to my room tomorrow for lunch?" he asked with big eyes. "I can't," I told him, but that only made him smirk. "Okay then. Lunch detention in my room," he said, and my mouth dropped. "What?" I asked. I was shocked. "If you don't come, it will be lunch. Detention all week," he said, winking at me as he left the library. "He's overusing his power." I walked through the long, abandoned halls. "Today I have lunch detention with Call." I walked into the bathroom and looked at myself. My hair was kinda a mess, so I tied it up in a loose, messy bun. I was wearing the usual ugly school uniform with a gray pullover that was too big, and the sleeves went farther than my hands. I slowly sighed and made my way to his room. I walked in, avoiding eye contact, and walked to my lap table all the way in the back of the room. "You're 5 minutes late," he said, not looking up from his papers. "Okay. And?" I asked, making him look up from his papers with an annoyed look. "And?" he asked, as he slowly got up from his desk and slowly made his way towards me. "It's not even a real detention," I told him, but all he did was smirk down at me. "I can make it a real detention," he said slowly, placing his hands on my hips, spinning around in my stool so that I faced him. "So why am I here anyways?" asked him, crossing my arms, thinking it would make him drop his hands, but they only tightened their grip on my hips. "To keep me company," he said, and then brought me closer to him. My body was up against his. "Really?" I asked, giving him a look. I was about to say something else, but his lips crashed onto mine. I tried to push him away at first, but I couldn't. He was too strong, and I really loved his kisses. I felt myself kiss him back. His hands traveled from my hips to my butt, picking me up, placing me on the lab table. I wrapped my arms around his neck, bringing him closer to me. I felt him moan into the kiss as I bite on his lower lip. Then his hands traveled down up my waist and back down. He slowly crept his hands under my shirt, rolling it up along with my sweater. His hands sent tingles through my skin as they moved along my ribs. I pulled away from him, breathing as he kissed down my neck. He started sucking on my skin, and I couldn't help but let out moans. I wrapped my legs around him, pulling him closer to me. He chuckled at me, make me glare at him before I wrapped my arms around his neck and pulling him back to my lips. It only seemed like a few seconds of makeup out, but it was probably 10 minutes or more. We both pulled apart, breathing heavily. Both me and him finally realized what happened. We made out in his classroom, and both of us are missing our shirts. "You're not supposed to kiss your students, Mr. Stone," I whispered into his shoulder, as he still held on to me. "You're not supposed to sleep with you, teacher," he whispered back, making me laugh, as his breath tickled my neck. He slowly pulled away from me with his perfect smile. "You know you can't resist me," he said, as his hands roamed your exposed thighs. "I can try," I said, pushing him away from me. "And I won't stop trying to get you," he said, and I felt my cheek burn up. He leaned down and kissed each of my cheeks, slowly dragging it out. "Go on a date with me," he whispered against my lips. "No," I whispered, and he gave me a look. "And why not?" He asked me, his thumbs rubbed circles into my hips. "Because," I said, trying to think of some excuse. "Come on, just one little date," he whispered as he lightly trailed kisses down my neck. I bite down on my bottom lip so I wouldn't moan. "Come on, give in," he whispered between the kisses. I grabbed onto his upper arm as he bit lightly on my neck. There was probably a couple of dark love bites on my neck because of him. "Rose," he whispered, as he kissed back up my neck. His forehead was against mine, looking into my eyes. His breath hit my lips as I stared at him. "Call," I whispered against his lips, and he moaned and crashed his lips against mine. I giggled and kissed him back lightly. "I'm taking that as a yes," he said against my lips, and I opened my mouth to say something, but he leaned back in. "No, Call," I said, pushing his face away from mine. "What?" he asked, tracing my face. "We can't do this," I whispered, looking down. He took my shirt and slipped it on, buttoning up every button slowly as he lightly brushed my skin. Then he pulled the sweater over my head. "Okay, if you don't want to do this, you don't have to. But I like you way too. Much than I ever thought I would. I get it, I'm your teacher. I'll wait for you. But you have 9 months of school left," he said, kissing my forehead. I want this really, but I'm scared," I whispered, running my hands around him as I pulled him into hug. "Why are you scared?" he asked me, while running his hands down my back. "Because what if we get caught? Your whole teaching career is over," I whispered into his shoulder. "So? Do you think I care more about my job than you?" he asked, and I slowly nodded against his chest. "I don't. No one will catch us, promise," he whispered, making me smile into his chest. "No dates yet," I told him as I slowly pulled away from him. "So, just making out?" he asked, making me laugh. "Friends," I told him as I ran my hands through his hair. "Okay, friends. For now," he said, and placed a sweet kiss on my lips, then placing me on the ground. Here's your shirt," I said, picking it up from across the lab table. He took it from me and slipped it on, buttoning it up really fast. "How about we go for a movie and pizza, as friends?" he said, smirking at me. "Okay," I whispered, still unsure of my answer. Call leaned down and kissed me. I pulled away, giving him a look to cut it out. "Oops, I forgot," he said, smirking. "You suck," I told him, but he just smiled. "So where's your lunch?" he asked me. "I don't have one," I said, walking to his desk and sitting at his chair. "Here," he said, pulling out a Subway bag and opening it. He pushed me a little and sat in the chair, pulling me in between his legs so I wasn't really in his lap. He gave me half, and I slowly took a small bite. I slowly chewed it and looked at him. He was almost halfway done, as I just took my second bite. I felt him staring at me, so I kept taking small bites. "You eat really slowly," he said, leaning on his elbow looking at me. "Stop watching me eat," I said, putting my sandwich down. I reached over and took his water and took some sips. I slowly pushed the half-eaten sandwich to him, and he looked at me like I was crazy. "I'm full," I told him, and he shoved the sandwich back to me. "Eat it," he demanded. "Why?" I whinnied, moving it back towards him. "Because I like your ass, and if you're not eating it won't be so plump," he said, and I felt my cheeks burn as I quickly looked down at the half-eaten sandwich. "Oh, I love making you blush," he said, kissing my warm cheek. "Now eat," he said, grabbing his papers and starting to grade the papers. I lightly ripped of a piece and placed it in my mouth. Usually I eat good, like a lot, but for a few weeks I just have been picky. I finished the sandwich piece by piece and then grabbed his water again. "Happy?" I asked him, making him smile. "Very," he said, placing another kiss on my shoulder. "Watcha doing?" I asked him, moving closer to him, and he looked up from his papers. "Grading," he said, and I sighed, leaning back against him. "I'm bored," I told him, and he rested his chin on my shoulder. I rested myself against him, and he ran his hand down my thigh. In about 10 minutes, he finished grading and turned me around in his lap so I was straddling him. "Come to my class after last bell?" he asked me with hopeful eyes. "Why?" I asked, and he rolled his eyes. "So we can go to the movies," he said, and I looked at him like he was crazy. "What? But we can't leave together." I freaked, only making him sigh in frustration. "Fine, then I'll pick. You up? At 8? He offered. I slowly nodded, thinking about the idea of him picking me up. "Write your address," he said, and I nodded, grabbing a blue sticking note, writing it down and sticking it on his chest. He took it from his chest and placed it in his pocket. "Don't you have class to get to?" he asked me as he raising his eyebrow. I gave him a sly smile as I moved closer to him. "I was wondering if I could stay here. I don't want to go to gym," I asked with big eyes, hoping he would let me stay. "You want me to help you ditch?" he asked, slightly chuckling at the idea. "No, I want you to let me stay here for the period," I told him, rolling my eyes. "What if I have a class?" he asked me. "But you don't. It's your free period," I said, and he smiled. "How? Would you know?" he asked. "Because where are your student?" "Lunch ended like 5 minutes ago," I told him. "Bus," he just laughed. "Yeah, you can stay," he said, wrapping one of his arms around me. "Can I see your phone?" I asked him. "Why?" he asked, giving me a look. "So I can go on Tumblr," I told him, and he sighed, pulling out his huge ass phone. "Oh God, this is bigger than Canada," I told him as I grabbed the phone, which I could barely hold in my hands. "It's a note," he said, slightly pushing me. I looked at his phone that was locked by a passcode. "What's your password?" I asked him as I pushed the phone towards his face. 702, he said as he laughed, placing in the code. I went on Tumblr and leaned back against him, scrolling through my dash. His arm was wrapped around me, rubbing shapes into my side as he sat there, going through papers or something teachers do. I rushed around my room, trying to get ready for our friendly date. What the hell do you wear to a date but a friend date? I don't want to look like I tried too hard, but I still want to look nice. I finally managed to pick out a cream-colored dress with a large denim button-up over it. I was about to leave, but I realized I need shoes. Yeah, that's what you need. I slipped on my brown worn-in combat boots, as I rushed downstairs. As I looked for my purse, I heard the doorbell ring. Why is he here so early? Swinging the door open, I found Carl standing there with a big smile. He looked so normal, like a normal guy about to go on a date. "You look so gorgeous," he said, grabbing my hand and dragging me to his Hummer. "Where are we going?" I asked him as I got comfortable in my seat. "We are going to the next town over," he said as he sped off on the highway. The drive wasn't as long as I thought it would be. Soon we stopped at a movie theater that looked like it was from back in the day. There was hardly any cars in the lot and probably not many people here. "2 tickets for X-Men," he said as he handed the guy a couple of bills. "Sorry, sold out," he said, handing the money back. "What do you mean sold out?" Carl said, getting kinda mad. "What do you want to see?" he asked me, as he held onto my hand, pulling me closer. I bite my lower as I looked up, seeing what movies they were playing. "World War Z," I said, and he bought 2 tickets. We got some snacks, and then went to find seats in the back. More people started to fill in, which set an unsettling feeling in me. "Calm down, it's not like anyone will know us." Everything was great till some guy sat next to me. He kept moving and being ignorant during the movie. Out of nowhere, the guy let out a gross sneeze, spilling his drink on me. "Oh my God," I yelled, getting up from the sudden coldness. "What the fuck, man?" Carl yelled, getting up looking like he could rip him apart. "What?" the guys asked, acting dumb. "You just spilled your drink on my girlfriend," Carl yelled, picking him up by his collar. I felt my whole face heat up from him calling me his girlfriend. Why is he making such a scene? "Whatever, sorry, man," he said, but Carl got even more angrier. "Carl, let's just go," I said, grabbing his arm. I felt everyone's eyes on us. I hated the attention. "You bastard," Carl mumbled as he swung a punch at the guy. "Carl," I said, pulling him away from the guy. Security rushed in, making sure everything was fine, but they were kinda late. "Can you please leave?" they asked, and Carl glared. He wrapped his arm around me, bring me closer to him as we walked out. We got outside and he sighed, rubbing his neck. "I'm sorry for that," he mumbled. "It's fine. Let's just go home and get some pizza," I said, and he looked back at me with a huge smile. He took my hand, and then as soon as we stepped out, the rain started pouring. I squealed. I pulled myself closer to him. By the time we got to the car, I was soaked. I looked down and noticed I was wearing all white, and you can see right through it. I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hide my black bra and thong. "If I had a jacket, I would give it to you," he said, making me look at him as he drove. From this angel, his jawline looked amazing. I just wanted to reach out and trace it. "It's fine," I whispered, as pulled my knees closer to my body. "You're cold?" he asked, running his hand down my thigh that had goosebumps. He left his hand there for the rest of the ride. He parked at some fancy-looking building in the city part of town. "You live here?" I asked as he helped me out the Hummer. "Top-floor condo," he said as we walked in and went to the elevator. We got to the top floor, and there was just a couple of doors. We walked to the last door and he unlocked it. He stepped him holding the door for me. It was really nice and clean, for a guy. The front room was the living room space with the kitchen. This place had really high ceilings and dark hardwood floors. There was black leather couches and a huge TV with an Xbox. "Let's get changed," he said, bringing me to a hall which had about 5 doors. The last one was his bedroom. It was so modern and perfect. There wasn't much color. It was more like dark blues, white, black, and gray. There was a beautiful stone fireplace, from gray stone. Here, he handed me a simple black t-shirt that smelt like mint and aftershave. "No pants?" I asked, giving him a questionable look. "Do you really think you're going to fit in my pants?" he asked me, looking me up and down. "Probably not, because you're just a fat ass." I told him, looking him up and down like he did to me. What did you say? He asked me. I'm going to change, I said, walking off to the bathroom. I slipped off my dress and boots. I slipped over the shirt. I looked at myself in the mirror. The shirt hung mid-thigh, and the V neckline swung lower than it should have. I sighed and walked to his room to find him shirtless. His back looked like it was scalloped by gods. I can feel you staring, he said as he turned around, giving me a wink. Gross, I said, scrunching my nose. Gross? He asked me as if he couldn't believe I said such things. You wish you could get all this, he said, motioning to his chest and abs. Already did, and I wasn't pleased, I said. And he walked forward, grabbing my hips, pulling me closer to him. You weren't pleased? He asked. Why are you questioning everything I say? I asked him, crossing my arms. Rose, you were moaning my name so loud, he whispered into my neck as he kissed it. You know this is supposed to be a friendly date, I told him, as in friends going out. I just can't keep myself under control, he said, leaning down and kissing me on the lips. I am cold, I mumbled against his lips. He groaned as he pulled away from me. I watched as he went over to his closet and grabbed a black pair on Nike Soaks. I smiled and slipped them on. They were big, so I pulled them up farther. Movie? I asked him. I'll order the pizza, he said as we walked out back to the living room. I looked through his movies and found Hangover Part 2. I smiled and put it in and sat down on the couch. Carl jumped onto the couch next to me, placing his arm around me. Blanket? I asked him, brought my legs up, wrapping my arms around myself. His apartment was cold. I liked it. The things I do for you, he mumbled as he walked out, and then came back with a huge, fluffy white blanket. He threw it on me, and I wrapped myself in it. During the movie, both of us were laughing at almost anything. I felt myself getting tired, but then the doorbell rang, waking me slightly. Pizza! Carl yelled, jumping up, going to the door, and coming back with the pizza. He placed it down on the coffee table and handed me a slice. I slowly ripped off a piece, placing it in my mouth. Why do you always ripe your food? He asked as he took a huge bite, taking more than half of the pizza. He's so gross. He eats like a wilder beast. I don't know. It's easier to eat it, I said, taking another piece. I ate about 2 pieces, and Carl probably ate 5 or 6. He handed me a Dr. Pepper, and I chugged it down. I slowly cuddled closer to Carl, and he looked down at me. You are amazing, he said, leaning down and kissed my forehead. What? I asked him. This date was the worst date possible. But you're still here with me, he said, wrapping his arms around me. Bring me closer to him. I wrapped my arms around him and rested my head on his chest. I felt him slip his hands under my shirt and rub my back. You can sleep, he whispered into my hair. I'm not tired, I mumbled into his side. I could tell he knew I was lying, but he didn't say anything. He just laughed and let me lean closer to him. Good night, he whispered as he kissed my temple. I just hummed and slowly felt myself drift off. Cal's Povey watched as she cuddled closer to my chest and fell asleep. As the movies finished, I slightly placed her off my lap. I turned off the TV and the lights. I picked her up and walked to the bedroom, placing her down on the bed. I grabbed the covers and pulled it over her. I slipped in next to her, pulling her closer to me. Carl? She whispered and looked up at me, rubbing her eyes. Yeah? I asked as I pulled her closer to me. Nothing, she said, and crawled on top of me. She rested her face back into my neck. I wrapped my arms around her, resting my hands on her lower back. Good night, love, I whispered again. "Good night, Stone," she whispered back, her lips brushing against my neck. I could tell she was asleep because her breath was even and she was spread out across my chest. I smiled as I looked down at her. I think I love her. I really do. She is the most beautiful girl I have ever laid eyes on. I need to have her in my life. I don't care if I'm her teacher. Me and her happened before that. There's no way I'm letting her go. I woke up and felt strong arms around me holding me. I opened my eyes and looked down to see that I was laying on top of Call. I looked down and noticed how peaceful and handsome he was. I lightly traced his jawline, his stubble lightly scratching me. He pushed closer to my hand, and his eyes started to twitch. He slowly opened them and his dark brown orbs landed on my eyes. I smiled down at him, and he lightly traced my thigh, up my waist and to my neck. He pushed me down on top him. "Good morning, my love," he whispered as his lips brushed against mine. "Good morning, Call," I whispered as he pushed his lips against mine. We kissed for a few seconds till I pulled away from him. I thought, "Where are friends?" he said. I let out a giggle and felt a blush spread against my cheeks. "Yeah? Okay then, friend," I said, getting off of him. I stood up from the bed, stretching out my muscles. "Where are you going?" he whined, reaching for me, trying to get me back in bed with him. "Friends don't sleep in the same bed," I told him, smirking. He got out of the bed, following me as I slipped out of his room. "Come back, babe," he yelled, as I laughed, running off through his place. I looked around, trying to find a hiding spot. I heard his loud steps running after me. I slowly slipped into some room. I looked around and saw it was probably his office. There were loads of books on the shelves and a large desk in front of a window. There were some paper and other things. "Oh, Rose, where are you?" His voice rang, and I giggled, sitting on the huge leather swirl chair. I brought my legs up and turned around from the door. I heard him walk in, and I smiled, biting my lip, trying to keep myself from laughing. "Rose," he said in his deep, sexy voice. I grinned and spun around, looking at him. He was standing there in his boxers and messy hair, looking at me with this evil smirk. "Why'd you run from me?" he asked, walking closer. "Because," I said, leaning against the desk. "Because isn't an answer," he said in a snotty voice as he rolled his eyes. "Because isn't an answer," I said, mocking him as I rolled my eyes at him like he did to me. "You're gonna get it," he warned as he stepped closer to the desk. "Really?" I asked him, and I crawled on top of the desk and sat down, wrapping my legs around him. "Really?" he said, leaning down closer to me. He grabbed my hips and brought me closer. His lips hovered over my lips. "Friends aren't supposed to kiss," I whispered to him as I kept my eyes on his lips. "Fuck it," he said as he pressed his lips to mine. I smiled as we shared a passionate kiss. I let my hand trace his abs and he moaned into my mouth. I felt his hands make their way under me, picking me up by my butt. He pulled away as he carried me through the condo. I kissed down his jawline and down his neck. I nibbled on some spots and sucked as he brought us back to the bedroom. He placed me back on the bed and straddled me. He pulled off my shirt and then kissed me roughly. I felt him bite my bottom lip. I let out a moan, and he slips his tongue into my mouth. As I started to lose my breath, he pulled away and kissed down my neck. He sucked on my neck, and I'm pretty sure it will leave a huge love bite. I laughed as his lips kissed my breast. I felt him smile against my smile, his teeth slightly gracing my soft skin. A few hours later, I wake up completely naked under the covers, with Call's arms holding me close to him. I had my left side mostly on top of him as I laid on my stomach. I can't believe I just did that. I had sex with my teacher. I sat up and looked over at Call. He had a goofy grin spread across his face and his hair still messy. I leaned over and placed a kiss on his cheek before getting up. I slipped on my thong and on of his shirts. I walked to the kitchen, which was beautiful. I slowly pulled out a bowl and made pancake mix. I started making the pancakes when I heard footsteps behind me. He slowly wrapped his arms around my waist, hugging onto me tightly. He rested his chin on my shoulder, kissing my neck down to my shoulder. "You can cook?" he mumbled against my neck. His breath tickled across my neck, sending shivers down my back. "Yeah, why?" I asked him, flipping the pancake perfectly. "It's hot," he whispered, making me laugh. "Call let go of me," I said, moving his hands away. He groaned and sat down at the bar. A few minutes later, I finished the chocolate chip pancakes and put some on a plate for him and some for me. I sat down next to him, handing him his plate. "I'm expecting this every morning now," he said as he shoved some pancake in his mouth. "What, you can't cook?" I asked him as I watched him shove more pancakes in his mouth. He barely chews before he swallows, and then shoves more in. "I can cook cereal," he said, looking at me with his perfect brown eyes. "Seriously?" I asked him, and he just smiled at me. "I'm not the best cook," he said, with a little blush on his cheeks. "Aw, you're so cute," I said, giving him a peck on his heated-up cheek. "I'm not cute, I'm sexy," he said, flexing his arms. "Yeah, keep thinking that," I said, rolling my eyes. But he was right, he was attractive, extremely attractive. "Hey, an hour ago you were moaning my name," he said, and I blushed and punched him in the arm. "Whatever," I said, as I slowly took another bite of my breakfast. "What do you want to do today?" he asked as he grabbed the dishes and started washing them. I walked up behind him and wrapped my arms around him, resting my head against his strong back, since I wasn't tall enough to rest it against his shoulder. "Nothing," I mumbled into his back. "What do you mean, nothing?" he asked as he chuckled. "Just nothing," I said, and he turned around in my arms. "Movie day?" he asked, and I nodded. I ran to the bedroom and grabbed the fluffy blanket and came back and sat on the couch. Call grabbed the remote and walked over, sitting next to me. "You're such a lazy bum," he said, placing his arm around me and pulling me closer to him. I laid against him. He was so warm. "Yeah, but you love it," I said, snuggling closer into his side. "Yeah, I love your bum," he said, kissing my temple. He pulled me closer to him as he slipped his hand under my shirt, rubbing shapes into my side. "Perv," I whispered, and he laughed as he turned on the hockey game. He grabbed my hand and kissed it. During the game, he would play with my finger or rub shapes into my hand. "I have to get home soon," I told him. He just sighed, pulling me closer. "Do you have to?" he asked, pulling me into his lap. "Yeah, I'll see you Monday," I said, but he just sighed even louder. "Monday? That's too long," he said, still not letting me go. "It's 2 days," I told him, and he gave me a pouty look. "Fine," he mumbled as he got up. I smiled, getting up and going to the bathroom. "Where are my clothes?" I asked him, and he handed me my clothes, that were warm and clean. "You washed them?" I asked him with a huge smile on my face. "Of course I did," he said, and kissed my cheek. I turned away from him and took off his shirt. I slipped on my clothes, and then his shirt over the dress. I tied the shirt in the back. "Ready?" he asked me. I turned and saw he was in sweats and a t-shirt. Even in sweats, he looked so good. "Yup," I said. He grabbed my hand and led me to his Hummer and drove me home. It's been a few months. It's now the beginning of December. No one knows about me and Call. I got dressed in my boring school uniform with a huge warm black cardigan and thigh-high socks. I slipped on some flats and made my way to school a little earlier, like every day. I walked to Call's classroom and slipped into the room, locking the door. I turned around and saw Call sitting at his desk, running his hands through his hair. He looked so stressed. His skin was a bit pale and he had dark bags under his eyes. He had a stubble going on from not saving, and it was getting longer than usually. I sat on his desk, and he looked up at me, giving me a small smile. His Dale, dark brown eyes locked with me. "Why are you so stressed?" I asked, running my hand in his hair, fixing it. "These idiots in midterms," he mumbled as he looked back at his papers. "You need to relax," I said, getting up and standing behind him. I slid my hands down from his neck to his shoulders. I started to rubber his neck and strong shoulders. He leaned closer to me, letting out a groan. "You're amazing," he mumbled, closing his eyes. "I know," I said, leaning over, kissing his lips lightly. "You need help?" I asked him, sitting down on the desk. "I'm the only one allowed to see these," he said, not even trying to hide the papers from me. "And?" I asked, rolling my eyes. "I already took my midterm for this class," I said, taking some from his stack and grabbing a pen. As I graded paper, I felt his eyes on me. "Aren't you supposed to be grading?" I asked him, looking up from the papers. "Yeah, but I rather look at you," he said, and I smirked. I went back to grading, and so did Call. "Are you going to the trip to Canada?" he asked after some time of just grading in silence. "Clearly," I said, not looking up from the papers. "So am I," he said, placing his hands on my thighs. "Why?" I asked, looking up at him. "They need more teachers to make sure dumb teenagers don't do dumb things," he said, pulling at my skirt, trying to move me closer to him. "You know I am a teenager," I said, not letting him bring him closer. "You might be, but you're not," he said, pulling me down to him lightly, placing a kiss on my lips. "You make no sense," I mumbled against his lips. "Stop talking," he mumbled against my lips as he kept kissing me. I straddled him, wrapping my arms around his neck. He kept kissing me roughly, his hands exploring my body. "Call," I mumbled, looking at the time, but he let out a growl and pushed harder against me, kissing me even harder. As the bell rang, I pulled away from him, taking in a breath of air. "I need to get to first period," I told him, gathering my things. "No, you don't," he whinnied, like a little kid. "You have a class," I told him as I pulled his hands off my hips. "I'll come by your house today," he said, as I made my way out of his room into English. As I got home from school, I changed out my skirt, just walking around in a tank top and some lacy panties. I was home alone till later tonight. I didn't have to bother with pants. I tied up my hair in a messy ponytail and turned on the music. I had to pack for Canada since we are leaving TH this weekend. I got my large Nike gym bag and started packing things I would need, like sweaters, thick leggings, jackets, socks, and such. I heard the door open and then loud steps. I panicked. It was way too early for my mom to be home. I let out a small squeal as my door opened and Call walked in. "Where's your mom?" he asked me, dropping down on my bed. "Work. She's a nurse," I told him as I kept packing. "So when is she coming home?" he asked, with an evil smirk, sitting up and walking towards me. He placed his hands on my hips and pulled me into him. "Not until later," I said, smirking, placing my hands around his neck. "Good," he said, before he crashed his lips down to mine. "Stop. I need to pack," I said, lightly pushing him away from me. I walked to my closet, looking around, seeing what else I need to get. I felt Call's eyes on me as I walked around my room, getting things I needed. "I can feel you looking at my ass," I said, turning around, crossing my arms. His eyes traveled from my legs up to my chest. "And now you're staring at my boobs," I said, grabbing huge hoodie that I stole from one of my friends. It was huge and covered past my butt. I hated it how he stared. I am a very self-concerned person. I went back to packing when I felt the hoodie being yanked at. I turned to face Carl, who stood inches away from me. "Who's Miller?" he asked me, his eyes burning with jealousy. "What are you talking about?" I asked, and he pointed to the he hoodie. It was a football hoodie from one of my guy friends. "It's Kyle's," I told him, and a shot of anger shot through his eyes. "Who's Kyle?" he asked in a loud, harsh voice. "Just a friend," I told him, crossing my arms. "Yeah, just a friend? Or a boyfriend?" he asked, and I glared at him. I like how jealous and possessive he got. It kind of turned me on. I was about to say something, but he yanked off the hoodie and threw it across the room. "Carl!" I yelled. I rushed to get it, but he stopped me. "No, I like you like this," he said, his eyes traveling my body, like he was trying to remember every little thing about it. "Well, I don't," I yelled, and slipped on a t-shirt that I stole from him a while ago. "What?" he asked, walking closer to me. He placed his arms around me, lifting my chin so that I would look at him. "Nothing," I whispered, wanting to drop the subject. "Why don't you like your body?" he asked softly, tracing my cheek. "Carl, can we not talk about this?" I said, pushing away from him, and he sighed, following me. "Please talk to me," he asked, and I sighed, as I felt his warmth envelop me. I fell in his arms, and he brought me down to the floor, holding me closely to him. I felt my body shaking, and I didn't even realize tears slipping. "Rose," he whispered, kissing the top of my head. "Now I think you just want the sex?" I whinnied as he smiled down at me. "The sex is good, really good, but that's just a bonus," he said, helping me up. "We aren't together," I whispered. "It's true, we never confirmed we were together. We never really even talked about it." "Hey, yes we are," he said, and I looked up at him as he towered over me. "But..." I was about to say something, but he kissed me. "Shut up," he told me as he smirked down at me. "I need to finish packing," I told him, walking out of his arms and grabbing other things that I would need. I would throw things at Carl, and he would just fold and put them in bag. I smiled at him. He just looked at me, giving me a look a mother would give a child. "Thank you for helping," I said, as I climbed on top of him, straddling him. "Anything for you," he whispered as he wrapped his arms around me, just hugging me. I smiled as I rested my head in the crook of his neck. I got dressed in gray leggings and Carl's navy blue sweatshirt from college. It didn't have his name. It had the school name and the hockey team logo. I had some white Toms, and my hair was in a very messy loose ponytail. I had some makeup, but not a lot. I had my gym bag and my small over-the-shoulder purse. I arrived at the school and noticed a lot of people have gotten here already. I signed in and sat down far from everyone and pulled out my book. I kept reading when I felt eyes on me. I looked up from the pages of my book and noticed Carl looking at me. He was standing with Mr. Streck, who was pretty young too, maybe a few years older than Carl. He noticed that I looked up from the book and gave me a smile and a wink before turning back to Mr. Streck. I smiled and looked back into my book. I heard everyone getting up. I looked up, and I got up, heading to the buses. I was the last one on and sat next to this really cute joke kid, Tyler. I pulled out my book again, but I felt him looking at me. I looked up from my book and noticed Carl looking back. I looked back to my book, hoping this ride wouldn't last too long. I felt an arm wrap around me. "Yes, Tyler?" I asked, not looking up from the book. "I didn't say anything," he said, smiling. "Why is your arm around me?" I asked him, and his smile got bigger. "What? I can't put my arm around a beautiful girl," he said as he tried to flirt. I sighed. How I could just have Call's arm around me. Him showing me off to everyone so they knew I was taken. After about an hour, I fell asleep for the rest of the ride. We finally crossed the border, and it took forever for everyone to be checked. We finally got to the mountain camp. It was beautiful. There was so much snow. I leaned over Tyler, looking out the window as we finally stopped. Everyone got up, leaving the bus. Girls are staying in the girls' cabins, bunk with anyone 6 per cabin. Cabins A1, A5. Same for boys, but B1, B5. I don't want boys going to the girls or girls sneaking to the boys. The teachers will be in cabins A5 and B6 and some others in C cabins. We will meet at main cabin for ever meal. Breakfast at 9, lunch at 12, and diner at 6. After breakfast, we will give out the plans for the day. We are only staying for 4 days, Mrs. Jansen said, and everyone was picking people to stay with. Anne and some other girls from the soccer team came up to me smiling. "Want a room with us, Captain?" Anne asked, and I smiled. Anne was a tall, black-haired girl. I played soccer with her since middle school. Anne was the closet thing I had to a friend in school. I am the captain of the soccer team, and I get along with Ever perfectly, but I'm not really friends with them. "Sure," I said, picking up my gym bag and my book bag. Mrs. Jansen gave me the keys to cabin Al, and we walked off to the cabin. There, where 2 bunk were up against the far walls, and the first bunk was in the corner. I placed my gym bag at the top bunk, and Anne placed her things in the bottom bunk. Everyone was unpacking, and I just placed my gym bag on the floor, not really seeing the need to unpack. I grabbed my phone and saw a text from Carl. "Meet me behind the main cabin at midnight. See you soon, love." I smiled at the text and sat in my bed reading. All the girls were gossiping and talking about how exited they are for soccer season. "So, Rose, any man in your life?" Anne asked, and all the girls looked over smiling. "Yeah, kinda," I said, and they all giggled and jumped into my bunk, wanting to know more. "Who is he?" Macy asked, smiling, showing her braces. Her dimples showed as she smiled, and her feckless filled her face. She had green eyes and brown hair that was always tied up. Her twin Mary looked just like her, but no braces. "He's not from school," I told them, and they all looked at me with a dull look. I didn't know how much I should tell them. It's not like I can be like, "Yeah, I'm dating Mr. Stone." "Well, you don't talk to anyone in school," Jessie said, pushing her braided, dark hair back. She was a short girl from Mexico. She was one of the best players on the team. "So tell us more about him," Ryan said as she clapped her hands. She had bleacher, short blonde hair and big brown eyes, and one of the best goals I know of. "Well, he is a hockey player. He's older, and he's so funny," I told them, and they kept looking at me to tell more. "Have you done it?" Anne asked, and I felt my cheeks go red. I did not want to talk to them about this. "Do you really want to know?" I asked, and they nodded. I laughed and turned off the lights in the cabin. "Good night," I told them, and they sighed, going to their bunks. I had my phone with me and waited for midnight. As it turned midnight, I jumped off the bed. I slid on some boots and my leather jacket over the hoodie. I slowly closed the door, taking the key with me. I rushed to the main cabin and walked behind it. I looked up and noticed it started to snow again. I looked around and didn't see him here. I was starting to freak out because I hate the dark. I felt hand grip my shoulder and spin me around. I was about to let out a scream, but I felt lips crush against mine. I gripped onto his arms, standing on my tippy toes, pressing myself closer to him. We pulled away, and I smacked his chest. "You prick," I whispered, yelled at him. "What's scared of the dark?" He joked as he pulled me closer to himself. "Yes!" I yelled back, punching him. But he didn't take it seriously. He just laughed at my attempt to punch him. Really? He asked as he saw me frowning. Yeah, you jerk, I mumbled as I crossed my arms. He smiled and placed a kiss to my temple. I'm sorry, love. I didn't know, forgive me, my love, he whispered into my hair. Yeah, whatever, I mumbled as he pulled me into his chest. Come back to my cabin? He asked me, turning me in his arms so that I faced him. I can't. I'm signed up for breakfast duty, I told him, which made him groan. Why can't I just have a night? With my girl? He whinnied, holding my hips. Because you're busy all the time now, I told him. I know, but hockey needs me, he said, and I smiled. He is on a team now, so when he's not making school plans, he's training. And I don't? I whinnied, pushing him slightly. Okay, tomorrow, meet me here, same time, and no breakfast duty for you, he told me, kissing me again. Can we go for a walk? I asked him, and he smiled, lacing our hands together. Let's go, he said, draping an arm around me, leading me on a path in the woods. Yes, it was dark, but I was with Call. I felt safe for some odd reason. Soon we walked back behind my cabin so no one would see us. He leaned down, placing a sweet kiss on my lips. I'll see you in the morning, he said, and I smiled, walking back to my cabin. I sneaked in. I'm glad no one noticed I was gone in the morning. I got dressed in a thick black leggings and a huge sweater that was white and red. I slipped on white leg warmers and my black boots. I slipped on my coat and let my hair fall. I walked to the main cabin, which wasn't really a cabin. It had a huge main room with couches in the corner. There was tables too, and a window thing for the kitchen. I walked to the kitchen and saw a couple of others here looking confused. Is there a teacher coming? A girl asked with worry in her voice. No, I told her, grabbing a huge bowl and making pancakes mix. I told them to start making scrambled eggs and put it in the huge bowl. As I finished the pancakes, I made sausage for everyone. We put orange juice at each table and I set up the coffee table. Soon everyone started to fill in. Everyone got their food, and I stacked a pancake and some eggs and sausage on my plate and sat in the kitchen eating it. As I finished, I got a cup of hot water and made some tea. I stood by the doorway and listened to Mrs. Jansen talk about what we are doing. Everyone left, and I started cleaning up because I felt bad for just leaving it. As I washed the dishes, I felt hands rest on my hips and soft kisses being placed on my neck. Call not here, I told him, throwing some bubbles in his face. You're such a mom, he mumbles against my neck where his lips still rested. What do you mean? I asked, frowning. Why did he call me a mom? You're like taking care of everything and it's so cute, he said, sitting on the counter next to the sink. Thanks, I guess, I said, not knowing how to respond to that. I felt him smile against my neck. His teeth lightly brushed my skin. So what are you going to do now? He asked me as his hands rubbed my hips. I might read or work on notes, I told him, making him groan behind me. Do you not know how to have fun? He asked as he swung me around him, his arms. I do. I just don't want to. It's cold, I told him as I finished cleaning the kitchen. I love you, he whispered as we walked out the kitchen, walking a little too close. To me, Mr. Stone, I told him as I pushed him with my hip. Yeah, he said, smacking my Aries before he walked off. God, he knew how to get under my nerves. I watched as his hands stuffed in his pockets as he walked off. I watched his bum in those jeans. What's wrong with me?